Shahad, once again, it's so nice to meet you. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Yes. So I saw the film, was so enamored by the film, and I have all the questions for you. Um,
Yay!
Yay! Okay, let's do it. Let's do it. So I've heard you speak in other interviews about how when you're describing this film, you always start by saying that it's a film about a father who chooses the sanctity of life, life being the literal translation of Hayat's name, um, and goes above culture, right? So I'm really interested to know how you even came to this film. What was the premise? How did you arrive at your premise, and what was the writing process like for you?
To be honest, it's for me, it's the craziest thing because I never thought I will make a film about mermaids. A lot of people come up to me. I was like, "We love mermaids, and I love mermaids too." But I didn't think about them when I was a child. I'm like dreaming about mermaids. That didn't happen. But it was just a coincidence. And I remember I was writing in these diaries, and I like to write it in it for inspiration, for whatever. And then this mermaid came up, and I was like, "Oh, that's fun." I never expected a mermaid to come up to this character. And then I started. I was like, what is a mermaid? And I read, one of the stories that was the most interesting to me is that a mermaid is the goddess of fertility. And she had, and just by that, that's a contrast. And then and then she had fell in love with a human lover, and then had killed him by mistake, and then she commits suicide because she killed her human lover. So the gods are like, "No, you're not gonna die on our watch." So they you can't die on your own terms. So they preserve her body into this mermaid, and she becomes the goddess of the sea. And from that story, I was like, "Oh, I can use that. I can use the idea of a mermaid, as symbolic for women who choose the unbeaten path, for women who choose to be free yet isolated at sea." And from that, the idea came to be. And then I went and made it even more local by the idea that I make it a set in an Arab society, in an Arab city, where there are present prejudices against women. So yes, so I wrote the short film. It was a very different short film. It was like very magical, and I worked with a couple of mentors and a couple of script consultants to get to the core of the story. And the core of the story was always about a girl who is rejecting her female body, symbolized in the mermaid's body. So she's rejecting this female body while at the same time embracing the masculine, because she thinks the female is weak and the masculine is strong. And she thinks her only way out is by embracing the masculine. So for me, that's where the story originally stemmed. But it took a lot of, because I have a short film first, so I and Mermaid. And then in the short film, it was the big idea was that father chopping a mermaid in half in front of his girl. She's hiding, but that was the big idea. And I felt it was such a missed opportunity to tell the story of a girl rejecting her own body, of a girl rejecting her female body. Because for me, to be honest, it was the weirdest thing in the world was becoming a woman, getting your period. I'm like, yesterday I was wrestling with my brother, and I'm winning all the time, winning, like cousins winning, always winning. And then suddenly I'm like, why are they becoming stronger and I'm becoming weaker? Why are they not working as good as their muscles? And then they're like, you're a different kind of, you're a different body, So for me as Shahad, to embrace the body of a woman, to embrace the body of a girl, it took me a long time. And I wanted to tell a personal story through the symbolical, through symbolism. And for me, the story was always the main story. It was always the journey of Hayat, rejecting the body once she feels it's changing. And then by the end, she finds its true and hidden power.
For sure.
Mm.
And that moment when well, first of all, when she is like sacrificed the second time, when she goes to the water the second time, is it that the water rejects her or she rejects the water?
Okay, yeah, I like that question. So
Okay.
it's definitely because a lot of people come because it's definitely she rejects the water and the water lets her go. So she keeps on rejecting the water every time she enters it, and I love that. You know, originally in the script we had underwater scenes, so we had her actually interacting with the mermaids, and at one point I really didn't want to see the underwater. I wanted it to be a mystery. I wanted it to be that only girls who embrace who they are allowed to see what's underwater, what's lurking beneath. And I really wanted to keep the underwater a mystery for everyone who hasn't embraced the water yet.
Yeah. And when she does come to land and she's, physically dragging the sea maiden and she kills her. I'm interested to know for you, was that moment kind of an embodiment of this new masculinity or a folding into more of herself and her being? Because like you previously said, like she has knowledge of the water and in a way her body is this way to combine land and water. She is the connection between the two.
Yes.
And
Yes.
so when she does kill the sea maiden, what is that moment of transformation for her?
I think for me, that's been the moment. Once she's out of the water, she knows the only way out is for her to belong to another group. And the strongest group are the fishermen group. And if she wants to survive, if she wants to be alive, she needs to prove that she can do as well as the men. She needs to prove that she can be part of the fishing community, because that's what we do to ourselves within even our communities. We always think, no, but as human beings, we need belonging. So you always, even if it's something that's standing against you, even if it's something that's telling you, your whole existence is forbidden and it's you shouldn't, exist. You're like, you kind of say, but maybe for me it was like this. I was always for years. I was always, bending over backward. One of my friends says it's like we're doing jambas. Like, it's like, maybe like this they will accept us, maybe, but and then you come to a point where like, why am I going out there defending our culture, defending everything, and no one is defending my right to exist, and you start thinking, yes, maybe I don't belong there, but it doesn't necessarily completely mean that I'm rejecting that culture. It means that I'll find my way, but I'll still accept other things that comes from the culture itself.
Exactly. Yeah, no, I relate to that so much. Other people reject you and then you start to reject you. And so much of that journey is getting over that.
Yeah.
Yeah. You've also said that you didn't want any antagonists in the film, that everybody is, their own victim. And can you speak more to that? Because I found that to be super interesting, especially in this conversation about like women in a patriarchal society and having their bodies rebel against them and having to make sense of their body as it relates to culture and culture as it relates to their bodies.
I mean, while writing Scales, I really wanted to, every time I was thinking, I was like, okay, well, what is this matter? I mean, for me, that's the fun part of filmmaking. It's like relating these metaphors and coming up with the images that will imply these metaphors. So I was always thinking of, I was always thinking of everyone around me in my society, and I don't think anyone was a bad person. I think boys just as well were victims of circumstances. Men just as well were boys before and they were victims. And I really, really was really insistent that I don't want an antagonist. And people, when they read the script, a couple of consultants, they were like, but Amir is not acting like an antagonist. And I was like, why should he? And then they were like, then the mermaids are the antagonists. And I'm like, why should they? So it was always this conversation where, no, like an audience need to have like a clear vision that this is a good person and this is a bad person. And I never believed in that. And I'll never, I don't think I'll ever do that in any of my films. Life is about sharing perspectives, and life is about sharing, and when you, every time, it never fails. If you have an open mind, when you see life through that person's perspective, you understand them. And you understand where they're coming from. So for me, the characters, whether it was the father, whether it was Amir, whether it was any character in the village, they were all victim of circumstance.
I think that's also super interesting to think about when we think about the portrayals of women in the film, because Hayat's mother, who is not, you know, what you stereotypically see as this, you know, motherly figure, this person that Hayat goes to. It's her father in a way. And, you know, then there are the mermaids who we don't see, but they are this magical, you know, beautiful thing. And then we have these women who ostracize Hayat. So there's these different levels of what womanhood looks like. Can you please speak to more about how you were looking to portray women, you know, as preservers of culture, and as it related to Hayat, and just in the village? What were you saying with your portrayals of them?
I mean, I'll try and say it without being enemy to women. I remember we were talking about it, me and my producer, and he had been working with a lot of, you know, Arab girls on their own scripts. And he was telling me every time I worked with a girl, she always said, "Oh, my father doesn't allow me, and my father doesn't allow me." And once they, it says writing a script is like going to therapy. So once they get to the end of the script, they always realize that it's not the father who's not letting them, it's the mother, you know, who's controlling the father. And it's so funny for me because you have the different women in the society, but you have the older women who have embraced the culture, who have decided, you know, I'm not going to step outside of my comfort zone. I'm not going to step outside of my belonging. I'm not going to reject anything. No, my culture is the best, and I'm not going to reject anything, and I will raise my kids accordingly. And that's in reality all of us. And these women are the women I portrayed in the village. The women who also, they're not bad. They are victims of those circumstances. They told them that this is the way life goes. There's no other chance. There's no other choice. And, you know, they embrace it. And I feel, and it's just my personal opinion, I feel that women embrace it the most because I feel they sacrifice the most. You know, they sacrifice their life for a certain culture, for a certain tradition. They sacrifice a bit of their happiness, a bit of their freedom, sometimes a lot. And you know, in a way, they don't want, you know, to give. You know, it sometimes feels that why should I give the other generation the right to live when I didn't have the right to live?
Yeah. For you, is Scales Hayat's story? Is it a father-daughter story? Is it a story about culture as it relates to women? Is it all of those things?
I mean, I definitely absolutely love the father in the film because I wanted, I wanted this male perspective on what's happening, and I wanted the father to be, you know, the film starts with him. He does an action, and with it everything in that village changes. Sorry, I forgot the answer to the question.
Say it again.
I forgot the question.
I was asking more about like whose story it is really, because I know we're with Hayat through it all, but I found myself thinking like, oh, this is so much also a father-daughter story, a story about the redemptive power of love in the midst of.
For me, definitely the main story in the film, and the story that I didn't want to like go into subplots or other stuff. I wanted to tell a story, one journey of Hayat and her body and her self, the metamorphosis that's happening to her body, that she keeps rejecting it until she finally accepts it. So it was always, Scales was always a story between Hayat and herself, because I could have, you know, made it between Hayat versus her society, Hayat versus her father, her mother. That wasn't the point, because, you know, for us, for me, for Hayat, for her to overcome, you know, the prejudices that she thinks her body has, she have to overcome herself. So it's a story between Hayat and herself and her body.
Yeah, and I'd love to speak more to Hayat's body, because, you know, we have the scales on her feet, you know, her physical ability to drag a mermaid into the village. I'm interested to hear more about how you look to represent her body, especially as a young woman who is, you know, forming into a woman, and the vulnerability of, I couldn't help but think about the vulnerability of being a girl, the only girl on a boat with men, you know, and I would love to hear more. I'd love to hear more about, you know, how you were thinking about this young woman's body. Yes, she is in a way a pariah to the society until she, you know, proves her worth, proves her masculinity. But how you were thinking about representing her body. Yeah, I think that's really it.
Yeah, for me, that's what's interesting about her journey with the men,
Yeah.
because once she journeys with the man, she realizes, yeah, I don't even belong here, and it's one of the reasons that she embraces the sea one more time. It's when she's around other men, and it's so funny. I remember when I came up with her being on the fishing boat with the village, it was much more, we didn't have it in the film, but it was much more like, uh kind of, she has this surreal vision of all the men and their bodies and their muscles, and she realizes she doesn't have that. So it was focused on also the body of the men, but then I didn't want to do that in the actual shoot. So for me, it was always her seeing the men around her, make her accept her femininity even more.
Yeah. And did you have that understanding of Hayat versus herself and these kind of realizations at the very beginning when you started writing? Because I know that this film also took you 6 years to make. I'm interested in the arc of your journey.
I'll be very honest. I wrote the story because I was going through, I was a completely different person. A couple of, now I'm old, no, years ago, not a couple of years ago. No, but I was writing the story that I felt was for me. It was because I was changing, and every time I would go through an experience or I would go through something, I was learning to embrace my body. I was learning to embrace myself in this society without bending over backward. And I wanted Hayat to go through the same journey. So to be honest, every time Hayat went through something, I was discovering it with her. I was like, oh, that's how I felt that time. And, like, I remember the main thing was one of the first images was her sewing her gills. I was like, she needs to do that. She needs to do that as reparation. She needs to do that to move on, to finally embrace who she is. And so it was always for me a very personal experience while I was writing the film, and I was always discovering new things about myself as I wrote it.
And you felt that. I mean, I love the moments where we just see Hayat, looking out into the ocean or just alone with herself, or when you say like sewing her scales, it was so beautiful and intimate, and it felt like those moments were just for her. In the same ways that the moments that she would go into the water, they were also reserved for her and the other woman. Like they got to experience that, and we kind of took a step back.
Yes, definitely.
How did that play into the editing? Because you also had a lot of shots of just the water, or we'd just be on the water, or we'd be on the landscapes. And at a certain point, I was like, the landscape is its own character in this film. The water is its own character.
It's so funny. Like, I'll tell the story. I don't know if it's related, but I'd like to tell the story, how much the short influenced the feature. And when we were shooting the short, I was like, maybe I'll do a feature, but I wasn't sure because I was working on other stories. So I remember we were in this location that we picked. It was like a UNESCO heritage site, and we picked this location in Qatar, and we picked it 3 months ago. We took all the permits. We were sure this is our location. Beautiful old village, abandoned. And when the day came, and we are shooting with Basima, the same actress, and suddenly the police comes and they're like, this is a UNESCO heritage site. You're not allowed to shoot here. And we're like, with the DFI is part of the government. We're like, but no, it doesn't. And they were like, we don't care. Pack your equipment and leave. So everyone is panicking, and the production designer is like trying to find other locations. We're switching the script around so we can shoot what we can shoot. And then just, it's when God interferes and shoots. And then we found this location. And in that location, because the sea was so wide, so literally we were trying to shoot so fast and time is running against us, and we never had the watcher retreating and coming back. I never wrote that. Not me in the feature, not me in the short, like God wrote that. So we're in the water, and the continuity person was like, this is not going to work, the water is coming in. There was no water, it was dry land. And she's like, this is not going to work. So what we did was we made the water part of the film. So you start the film, there's no water. And then seriously, like the water was coming in, and it came in as like the tide came in all the way when we made it to the end of the scene. And I told my cinematographer, we will go back and we will take the water coming in and I'll use it in the film. So she actually, so that was never written. And then I was like, I will make the feature film just because of that. I will do. And when we went to Oman, we didn't have that same tide, so we had to do it in VFX. But it was so funny for me. One of the biggest attractions is like, what if the water goes and then return? And that actually all happened by mistake, you know.
Wow.
Yeah.
Happy accidents.
Yes.
Yes, 100%. And you spoke about your cinematographer briefly. I'd love to speak about black and white. The harsh contrast in certain moments. Why did you just choose to use to do black and white for the film?
So the harsh contrast and the idea that characters are coming in and out of the light, that was always there, even with the, colored version. So it was there, like Joao and I discussed it so much, having these high contrast. And once we got to the post-production, we had it in colors. Normally we colored the film. It looked gorgeous, really, really beautiful, Hayat in this orange dress, and like we only took colors. Even our costume designer did such a wonderful job, because he only took the color palette was only the colors that you find in the actual mountains in Oman, so it was very earthy. And it looked beautiful. But the big question that we were asking ourselves was, is it telling the story that we want to tell? Is it, is it giving the impression that we want to give? And it wasn't. It was too beautiful for the film. It wasn't giving the impression, that the timeless impression that we wanted for the film. And once we switched a couple of scenes to black and white and saw the contrast and saw what the black and white was giving us, we immediately switched the film to black and white. We regraded. We graded first in France, in Paris, and then we regraded with Joao, my beautiful cinematographer, in Portugal, with his own colorist. So so we're sure that's the right way to do it. And what's so funny about the story is that Joao's a feature that he did before mine also was graded, colors, everything, and they were like, switch to black and white, and they went and switched it. So yeah, it's 2 films that were switched to black and white. So I always tell him, don't shoot in colors anymore, just shoot in black and white.
Shoot in black and white, just accept it. Yeah. What about the reaction to this film? Have you been surprised by how people have been reacting to it? Are people on board for the cause of women starting their own revolutions?
Oh my God. In Saudi Film Festival, and a woman came up to me yesterday. She's like, I have 6 daughters. We're all Hayat. So yes, definitely there's a group of women, and they also, like, girls in Saudi really liked Iron Mermaid before. They really felt they related to. So we definitely have the group of women who love the film, and they feel it represent them so much, because we all been through this experience. Suddenly, why is this body changing? Please stop. I didn't ask you. You're there, and you have to deal with it. You have to learn how to deal with it on your own. So I feel that most girls can relate to, but also it's sometimes a complicated film and based on metaphor. So we're having the reaction where, I didn't get it and I don't understand, and it's not my experience, and that's fair.
Yeah. But I also think the use of metaphor is so, I feel like sometimes women have to create their own worlds to show up in the world that we currently exist in. You have to embody something else. And I think there's a beauty to how you embrace magical realism as a new way of being a woman in the world. Something to hold on to. What is the next thing that you're doing?
So I've been working on a TV show as a writer. So that's been so exciting. I'm so glad, because quarantine happened a year and a half ago, and I had signed up for the project just 3 months before it happened. So yeah, it's very long and I love it so much. It's historical and it's not mine, but it came to me and it was so perfect. And they asked me to be part of the writing group, and yeah, I'm writing with a couple of writers, and it's the best experience ever. It's a very important series, and I can't talk about it much, but it's so obsessed with it.
Yeah, no, well, I just thank you, because in an interview I saw you do, you were speaking about how you and a friend were talking about writing women-centered films, and you were like, should we write another film about women? Like, do we need to do it? And it's like, yes, we do, because there's 3.
Don't understand. Sometimes they also like, because everyone's like, aren't we bored of all those women? I'm like, why? What are you doing to be bored? Like, did you go make the film? They are bored already. Like, and I hear that a lot. What's really frustrating is I hear that from girls, and they think they're being cool. Like, we're over women films, you know. I'm like, how are you? How you can't be over something that didn't happen yet? You know, but it's their brain telling them, it's, you know. And I hear also a lot, you know, aren't we done of films about oppressed women? And I never thought of my film as about oppressed women. I hate the story of the victim. For me, Hayat is always a hero. But I'm like, maybe stop oppressing women and they will stop telling stories about oppressed women, you know. And so it's really frustrating sometimes, but girls are telling their stories. It's you know, they will keep telling their stories because, you know, that's their personal experience, and, you know, their personal experience will come out to the world.
Yeah. Is that part of why it took 6 years to make the film, just getting funding for a story that centered?
No, actually, because to be honest, I personally have gotten a lot of support, especially from Imagination Abu Dhabi, the company that produced the film from the beginning. As soon as they watched Iron Mermaid, so that was years ago, they were on board. It was getting things together was the thing that took time, getting the script in shape. Also, they had more films that they were shooting, so they wanted to shoot the other films first. So, you know, my turn came very late, but I got a lot of support from the DFI before them, and currently, to be honest, I'm getting a lot of support from Saudi and the Ministry of Culture and Information. They love the film, and this is what I'm really proud of, is that, you know, it's so funny that most Saudi men I'm meeting, they love the film, they understand it so well, and they too can relate to it. And yeah, I'm getting a lot of love for it, especially from the Ministry of Culture and Information.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Well deserved. Well, thank you so much for your time. I really
Thank you so
appreciate talking
much.
to you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Of course.